All right, welcome students, all the AT&T externs, aka quarantine. I'm really excited to be your host today. We have a lot of exciting information to share with you as we begin our first installment of our extra credit sessions. So with that, my name is Seth Ahu. I am a lead college recruiting manager. I support recruiting efforts at Howard University, Hampton University, Rutgers University, and the College of New Jersey. I've been with AT&T for 11 years, and that's how old I am. Totally kidding. That's a little bit in terms of my time here at AT&T. Started out in 2009. But a fun fact about me, some people don't know this, is I'm actually a professional hip hop dance instructor and a professional photographer, and I drink almost 2 gallons of water a day. That's a little bit about me, but enough about me. Let's get down to the core of our session today. But before we get into that, want to discuss a couple housekeeping with you. So this extra credit session is being recorded. So please drop if you do not want to be recorded, and you can view this recording afterwards. So we will allow 15 minutes of Q&A session at the end. So please utilize the Q&A pod to submit your questions throughout the session. So with that, I really have the distinct honor to introduce our speaker. As we all know, technological changes are accelerating today at an unprecedented speed, especially in these uncharted territories that we're currently in. So I'm really excited to talk further with our presenter today in terms of the changes in technology. But let's learn a little bit more about our speaker. So Mr. Ward Chewning is an AT&T Vice President of Technology Development. He's responsible for automation systems to include AI, machine learning or ML platform infrastructure, workflow, ticketing, dispatch, end-to-end incident management, AT&T AI ops, implementation, and advanced technician repair tools and interfaces. He has subsequently been with Bell South, and AT&T, I should say, for the last 29 years, and that should tell you his age, in a variety of areas, including developing advanced intelligence network services, building first carrier-grade DSL network management system, developing various provisioning activation solution for advanced enterprise IP and voice over IP services. He has a Master in Science in Information and Computer Science from Georgia Tech and an MBA in Finance from Georgia State University. He spends his free time camping, cycling, and rock climbing. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Ward Chewning. Ward?
Great, thanks, Seth. I appreciate the introduction. The one thing you didn't tell us, though, is that in drinking 2 gallons of water a day, how much time are you spending in the restroom? So.
Well, we can save that for another day. But I have found that to be very helpful. I did give up sodas and juice. Now I just drink water. I've been doing it for the past year.
That's a great habit. That's a great habit for sure. So thanks, and I want to welcome everyone today as well. I have to give you a qualification here right off the bat. I am not a qualified futurist. If you want that level of insight, I suggest you go listen to some of Elon Musk, some of his podcasts or interviews, or Ray Kurzweil. But I am a technologist, and as Seth said, I've been with AT&T for almost 29, 30 years now, and have seen a lot of change during that time. But again, I want to just be totally honest with you. The other day I was off adjusting some of my Google privacy settings, and I ended up wiping out my wife's YouTube subscriber feed. So I'm not sure. I told her I don't know if I am qualified to give a talk about technology change when I can't even figure out how to manage my my privacy settings yet. But we're going to give it a go here. And so if we could bring up the deck and go to that first page. Um, I think if you do kind of just step back for a minute and kind of set the context of some of the major things that are going on in the industry, we're going to kind of dive in and talk about that. And then we're going to go to some specific AT&T examples of how these things are kind of affecting our workplace and the products and the services that we all offer. I think you'll kind of see a nice trend here and some important questions that we've got to answer as we go along as well. So I think all of us can relate to the fact that technology is changing at an ever increasing rate. I think that's evident just from the fact that we've all feel a little cheated when we buy a new cell phone and 6 months later there's something that's new and bright and shiny and seems like is significantly better out there on the market for us to buy. But it's not just in the communications area. It's really in almost every field, every area of study out there right now where we're seeing the speed of technology change. And I think if you look at these 6 factors, you'll understand a little bit of the things that are kind of driving that. And I didn't come up with these. These were someone off the Singularity Hub that Ravi Diamandis that says that these 6 areas really are working together to drive this exponential change. And if you look at just each of these briefly, we look at like computation. Now, I think that all of us have probably heard of Moore's Law. It's a pretty simple thesis that is held for many, many years. And every couple of years, basically, we end up doubling the computation power of our CPUs and kind of cutting the cost of those in half. And if you would go to the next slide for just a second, I think we kind of see that example here. And if you look all the way back to the early 1900s, not just to the advent of the modern day computer, you can see this kind of upward trend. And even though in the last 5 years, in traditional computing, traditional CPUs, we haven't seen this exponential growth. It's actually started to flatten out a little bit over the last 5 years. But there are other areas that have picked up and that have added to this growth. And so when you look at this all the way from the very beginning in the early 1900s with some of the early analytical engines, you can see that it holds even all the way through the advent of the modern computer and CPU. The last top edge of this curve includes graphical processing units as well as normal CPUs, and that's why you see that curve continue to rise. So if we could go back to the previous chart. So what you see is this computational power that's available to us doubling every couple of years. And there's a lot of discussion, as we just talked about whether that was going to top out or stop because of, just the laws of physics that are involved there. But we're starting to see work that is getting done in the quantum computing area. And so I think it's fair to say that even from a computational standpoint, that we're going to continue to see that kind of exponential rise. If you look at convergence, really, if you kind of put all of these things together, you will see that many of these technologies and many of the advances tend to play off each other, right? And so you may see that computation and connectivity have a high degree of correlation, and that connectivity has also driven computation and vice versa, right? And so none of these are islands kind of amongst themselves, because they all influence each other. You know, we may see advances in AI lead to advances in the health field, in nanotechnology, and so all of these tend to be very interrelated. If you look at the intelligence area, you know, I think there is a tremendous growth that continues to come in this space. I mean, just think about all of the information that is available at your fingertips. I can't even remember the last time that I was in a library looking something up, trying to find information that wasn't readily available at my fingertips. Just think at all of the opportunities that are going to be there around the developing world for people to be able to get online degrees, so that, you know, 15, 20 years ago, there was certainly many geniuses that were out there that didn't have access to that education, that didn't have access to the internet, that couldn't get their voice heard. And now this human intelligence component is going to just continue to grow and drive as we add more and more people to the internet. And I think if we just go down to the connectivity piece, if you just look at where we were just 10 years ago, we had 1.8 billion people connected to the internet. Today, we've got 3 billion. And by 2025, it's estimated that we're going to have 8 billion people interconnected. And that connectivity expands more than just our own access to information and access to what's going on out in the world. It extends to all the devices around us. And that kind of plays into this whole sensor category, right? You think about all of the connected devices. When I go to connect my Bluetooth device up, you know, outside to my speakers outside my backyard, I'm picking up information where I can connect to the neighbor's refrigerator, to their alarm system, to, you know, their front door cameras. And so these sensors become more and more prevalent, become more and more widespread. It's estimated that, you know, we're going to have over 100,000 sensors potentially per city block, you know, in the not too distant future. And of course, the advent of 5G as a technology is going to allow us to connect those sensors in real time, to be able to move computing out closer to the edge so that that all doesn't have to be centralized. And so when you see that connectivity and the sensors, the computational power, then you see a very dynamic, growing, very connected, in a broader sense of the way, environment. The interface moments is a particularly interesting area. And I think if you look at some of the work that Elon Musk is doing, he is working on being able to improve the human computer connectivity through developing neural interface devices. And so I think if you listen to anything that Elon has to say, he will come right out and be very provocative in his statement that that we are really just already kind of cyborgs, right? That we are very much connected to our mobile devices, our computers, our TVs, and that much of everything we do is supplemented and enhanced by that connection to those mobile devices, whether that be your watch or your cell phone or your TV or your car, and that all of those things create a lot of opportunities to have interface moments. And I think that that Elon really believes that in order for humans to make the most of the technology, that we need to improve that bandwidth communication, particularly the output, right? Because we are now limited to our two thumbs in being able to type and text and formulate those queries. And so there is a lot of opportunity here in the interface moment space. You don't have to code anymore to be able to do some very amazing things using the technology that we have available. Think about 3D printing. That technology is available to everyone, and you can use that to craft and move from idea, conception, to implementation and manufacturing without having to go outside your house, right? We talk about robotics and robots out on the street. Funny enough, I live in Frisco, Texas, which is just north of Dallas. We actually have the food service robots running up and down the road in our neighborhood, and it is an interesting phenomenon to see these carriers kind of move down, navigate the sidewalks, navigate the people walking their dogs, and the bumps and the transition from road to sidewalk. And the other day, I actually saw a van pull up, and there was one of these robot delivery services that was there. It was kind of stuck in the grass on the side of the road, and he came along in the van and picked it up, and the whole back of the van was full of these robots that he had been picking up over the city. Now, I will tell you, it's a little crude at this point, but just think how far we've come in being able to do that visual recognition of where we are and be able to translate that using GPS coordinates down to that level of granularity to where we can order a hamburger from a joint, 5 miles up the road and have it delivered via robot moving up and down the down the sidewalk. And that's something new. That's something novel for us. But 5 years from now, it won't be novel anymore. And I think this idea of the ever expanding speed with which technology is changing around us, if you could go to the third slide, it really is exponential. And so if you kind of look at the graph down in the lower right, and we think about just the next 5 years, if you think about just the next 5 years, the change doesn't seem that drastic, right? You can get your mind around the fact that 5 years from now, we may be doing things 32 times better, right? But I think the shocking piece, the piece that is hard for us to get our minds around, is when you go out to 10 years and 20 years and 30 years, and we are 1,000 times more advanced. or we are a million times more advanced. And I think that at that point, we can't even imagine what that would be like. We can't even get our heads around what that would look like. So just to give you just a little bit of anecdotal comment here is that if you go back to the year 2000 and the entire amount of change that occurred from a technology perspective in the year 2000, if you go back just to 2013, that occurred in 1 hour and 6 minutes, just 7 years ago. And today, it occurs every 30 seconds. And so I just think when you look at that and you look at the way that this curve, goes up exponentially, we're going to see a tremendous amount of change over your lifetime, even in my lifetime. And the real question for us is kind of where does that end? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Just to give you, again, a bit of anecdotal evidence here. It was back in 1997 that one of the first computer actually beat one of the chess grandmasters. Now, chess, as complex and as with as much strategy as it has in that game, the rules of chess are relatively limiting. You have certain pieces, you can move them in certain ways. There's only a certain number of opening moves that you can do. But if you look at the game of Go, which is a classical board game, that game has billions of possible moves as compared to chess. And so it is one of the classic standards that folks have judged the intelligence of artificial intelligence and computers against. And so there was a company that created a computer artificial intelligence called AlphaGo that was designed to learn and play the game of Go. And so the very first one of these was it used training by playing other humans. And so it wasn't just a couple of years ago that original program, that original AI actually beat the reigning grandmaster of Go. And it beat him 4 games to 1. And so the next version of this AI, it was built so that it learned playing itself. And it was able to completely learn how to play Go, by just, recursively going through and playing itself and all the different permutations. And it was able to do that at hyper speed. It wasn't, limited by the time it took for a human to interact as the first one was. It was able to train itself up in a matter of weeks, and it was able to beat the previous instantiation of AlphaGo almost all the time. And so you can see that the progression here has some people quite worried. I think that when you look as you move up this curve, there is a point that some people believe that we will get to where we will develop a superhuman artificial intelligence. And at that point where it is able to exponentially learn and develop on its own, that folks believe that singularity event, will be a very bad thing for the human race. And if you listen to Elon Musk again, he is very clear that he believes that AI needs to be regulated, that this is a very real phenomenon that could happen, even within the next 50 years. I think the balance to that, though, is that many people that are very familiar with AI do not believe that we're anywhere close or near to being able to do that. So you see that there is clearly a divergence of opinions here. There are some very positive takes on kind of where this is going to lead us, because as you move up that curve, things become very, very efficient, and that the price of most things moves to zero. And I think, in fact, if you listen to folks in the field, in this field, they will tell you that eventually, as we move up that curve, price of things go to zero. We're probably going to end up having to provide a universal wage. And there's a lot of questions about our culture and society, about where people will drive their worth if they don't have jobs to do. And so I think there's a lot of very interesting concepts and ideas in this space. I hope I gave you just a smattering of some of the things that are going on and some of the things that we want to think about. Clearly, as we move into machine learning and AI becoming more prevalent, we want to democratize that capability. We want to have that available to people. We want to be able to make sure that people across the spectrum of society are able to have access to the internet, have access to these tools, and be able to benefit from them as well. So let's go to the next slide. And I'm just going to quickly give you 3 examples in AT&T about what we're doing and how things have changed and how things have been displaced by the speed of technology change, and how things have been substituted, and how we're trying to adapt and deal with this. So we're going to talk about cloud computing. We're going to talk a little bit more about AI and machine learning, and then streaming content. So let's go to the first slide, the next slide, if you will, and let's talk about cloud computing for a moment. So if you just think about hardware as, in general, as a platform, the progression over the last 30 years has been amazing, right? We have ridden Moore's law, and we have moved from mainframes to mid-range computers to Linux-based Intel chipsets to private cloud virtual machines, and now we're moving to the public cloud. So for AT&T, it's incredibly important, this movement that's underway to the public cloud, because we need to be able to do this to stay competitive and deliver a great experience to the end user. So it is one of our goals, one of our primary operational goals for this year and next year, to move quickly to this multi-vendor hybrid public cloud environment. So I will tell you, when I was a student, I never had to do the punch cards. That stopped right before I got into school, and thank goodness I never had to do punch cards. I was able to go in and access our mid-range computer directly. And I can distinctly remember in this progression as a young director at AT&T, thinking my team was crazy when they said we needed to move from our Sun boxes to basically a Intel PC based running Linux. I was like, are you kidding? We're going to put one of the most mission critical applications that we have on a PC, and lo and behold, that worked well. And now we are in this transition to move that same application doing the same job it did years ago onto the public cloud. So hardware really has become a commodity. And one of the things that you will see is that it is the network capacity that has allowed us to make this move. Without that wide area network, large terabit kind of storage and network capacity, we wouldn't be able to host these applications on a public cloud. By going and moving to the cloud, our implementation speed on hardware has gone from months to minutes, and access to data has essentially become ubiquitous. And so we can take and put, all of our large data lakes on the cloud, and everyone can get to that. We're no longer restricted to our own private internal networking requirements. And so, in doing this, we've seen that our cost has been able to decline substantially just by moving these to the public cloud. And so what has been, a disruptive technology throughout this time period, being the hardware growth and the way that hardware has, increased its capacity, as we talked about with Moore's Law, it's allowed us to change the way we do business, to move to a private cloud instance using virtual machines and containers, and decreased our costs substantially. So this is a great example of how we've been able to, and many companies obviously have done this, have been able to ride the technology curve and move to a place where we've been able to stay competitive given all of the changes that have occurred in the hardware space. So let's go to the next one. And we talked a little bit about AI and machine learning, and I just wanted to give you just a sense, first off, before we talk about some of the examples, just about how AT&T views AI and machine learning. So as I said before, we really want to democratize this capability. And so we want to be able to give this capability to many throughout our company so that they can use it, and really to weave that machine learning into all of our customer interactions, our software-defined networks, and our next-gen technologies. So we want that to be democratized. And one of the ways that we do that is we have platforms that are developed that allow anyone in the company to come onto that platform and to post a problem that they're trying to solve. And then again, anyone else out in the company can come in and propose algorithms, can use the data sets, and really come up with AI solutions on their own and be able to compete against another number of other folks inside of AT&T, and be able to really test out a number of different ideas, a number of different ways of looking at problems, and use different algorithms to get to the best one. And those probably change over time, right? And so it's accessible. People can come in and use the platforms. We use a lot of open source where folks are able to come in and implement that, where we can give them the ability to use these AI algorithms and not have to be deep computer scientists that are trained in AI. So it's accessible, it's shared, it is, for people, trying to allow them to help solve business problems that they have. And of course, we believe that it needs to be secure and ethical in everything that we do. That is a hallmark of AT&T. And we really are very proud, I'm very proud to work for a company where our ethics and our really reflect who we are as people, and that our company is grounded in that ethical base. So let me talk just a little bit about some of the ways that we use AI. And there's, many of these, so I'm just going to pick a few of those. So we use AI to diagnose problems in our network. So we've been doing this for a number of years. But the reality is that if you just look in a given day, there may be 9 million different events coming in from the network. And there's just no way using traditional methods to be able to process that many events and figure out whether those are real problems or not. So we have put an AI machine learning solution in place where it can, number one, it can bring in and process that many events, again, with the extra power that we have from the computing infrastructure. It can look at those events, and it's been able to develop patterns based on those events and based on feedback from us about which ones are real problems, which ones are the beginnings of problems that we can go and deal with proactively, and which ones are kind of a full-blown network outage that we need to dispatch a technician out to go and fix. And so now we're processing 9 million events a day on a normal day. When there is a network problem or a hurricane, for example, we may process 25 million events a day. And that helps us to very robustly be able to know where the real problems are in the network to go and attack those. We also use AI and machine learning to combat fraud. And so we have a lot of people that would love to come in and say that they were you and to change your account or get access to your billing information. And we use an AI solution in real time to be able to determine whether you are trustworthy when you call in to one of our call centers. We use it to direct our technicians as well. And so every day we have 30,000 technicians and, probably 100,000 jobs that have to get done out in the network, whether those are installs or repairs. We use machine learning to give that technician the absolute best set of jobs so that he can maximize the work that he has to do. So we use AI and ML to help direct our business and to really try to achieve the best outcome for our customers. So let's quickly go to the next one, and I'll just hit this one. This was one that I know everyone is very familiar with, right? Certainly not from 50 years ago, but for me, 50 years ago, I was 5, and I can remember the black and white single TV sitting in our living room. I can remember the fact that there were 4 channels that we had available, the 3 major networks and PBS, and that, of course, programming came on at given times during the day. And if I missed the wonderful world of Disney on Sundays, then I just missed it, right? Or if I didn't get to see the Flintstones in the afternoon, I'd have to wait till tomorrow to do that. And so content was controlled by just a few companies. Distribution came just through the air, right? Just through the antenna on top of our TV that we had to constantly adjust. The devices were limited. They certainly weren't connected in any sense. But now look at the industry and what's there. We have devices that are multi-platform, from the 100-inch, big screen in the media rooms down to our watches. Distribution is multi-technology, right? And so you can get it over the air, you can get it on your mobile phone, you can get it via cable, you can get it, via fiber. Distribution is essentially unlimited, and content is self-produced. So certainly some of the high quality movie content is still produced by large companies, but look at YouTube and TikTok and just everywhere today where people have access and the ability to produce their own content, to get their own message out, and some incredibly high quality content is produced and distributed, on platforms that are available for everyone to come to. And so this video revolution has occurred across several dimensions. It's occurred across devices, distribution, and content. And so you ask yourself, how do you compete in a world like that? How do you compete in a world that moves that fast? And I think AT&T, from our perspective, really has approached this by, first off, developing a platform. And so we have our new streaming platform, HBO Max. It's available, and we have a distribution company with Warner Media that goes with that. But it's really more about the platform and the ability that it gives us, rather than any specific device or technology that is limited there. So again, not dependent on whatever the technology is of the day, because it's moving so quickly, but our focus is on building a platform that can allow you to get the content that you want in whatever device over whatever distribution method that you'd like. All right, let's go to the next slide. I'm going to wrap it up, and then we're going to take some questions. And so I know there's a lot of questions on your mind about, given that curve and how fast things are moving, how do we succeed? I have, my children are your age. I have a son that goes down to University of Texas in Austin. My daughter is in graduate school getting her physician's assistant's degree. And so they're dealing with these things. And we've had these conversations, around our dinner table too. And the best advice that I can give you is that you're not going to be able to stop the pace of technological change. It's going to continue to move. It's going to continue to grow faster. It's going to continue to be harder to keep up with that. Skills are going to become irrelevant much quicker than they were in the past. And so I think you've got to adopt a mindset of continuous learning. Thinking that once you get done with college or grad school, that's it, that you don't have to learn anymore, is an outdated idea. And you're really going to have to do that and take responsibility and take initiative to kind of do that on your own. And again, just continuously. New technologies are coming out there every day. There's ability to learn about those and adapt those at any time. So again, we want to try to apply technology, but you don't want to get trapped by that. So don't get hooked in any one particular technology, because by tomorrow it's going to change. Our perspective is certainly platforms and not applications. So build infrastructure that can help you succeed there and doesn't lock you into any one particular component. And when I say capabilities and not perishable skills, I want you to think about a skill as, let's say, a particular programming language, whereas a capability is the ability to learn programming languages quickly. And so, I might be able to tell you, hey, go learn Python, be proficient in Python if you want to be able to come out of college and get a job in the computer field. But probably by the time you get out, it'll be something new. And so for me, the more important thing is for you to be able to quickly assess and pick up new technologies and learn those, and the ability to learn new languages, not specifically, the stuff that you've got in your skill set right now. And again, in the end, we need to continue to develop, leverage all the human advantages, right, that we have: creativity, innovation, emotion, values, passion, beliefs, critical thinking, humor. All of those things are going to be very hard to automate away. And it really does come down to the advantages that we as humans have. We're never going to be able to bring in 9 million events in a day and correlate those and sort all those out and be able to make informed decisions. But we certainly have the insight and the innovation to come up with and think about how to design and build a system that does that for us. So with that, I'm going to stop and turn it back over to Seth and take a few questions. I hope this was useful.
Thank you so much, Ward. Absolutely. I mean, I personally learned a lot, especially in terms of some of the things out there with the AlphaGo, that AI system that you mentioned that was able to beat the top performer in itself was amazing. But there were so many things that you brought up in terms of like how AI is becoming more prevalent, and it's even fabricated into our customer interactions as well as our software-defined network. So a lot of great information. So we really want to thank you for all of that you shared with us today. So let's go ahead and just take a few questions from our audience. And I know in terms of your career, there's so much you've done in the arena of technology. So wanted to start off with this question. I think it's something the students want to know. So what are some of those important classes you took in college to help you out in your career today?
So, I think this is going to be probably a funny answer, because I'm not going to tell you that it was my computer science classes, per se, right? Even though those developed in me, an appreciation for the technology and and an understanding about how to go about my skill and my trade, right? And to think about that. But I would just tell you that any of the classes that actually challenged me to think in different ways were the ones that were the most beneficial to me. Whether that was a history class or an English class or a Christianity class or, biology or whatever it may be, right? Those classes and those professors that brought something in front of me that challenged, my worldview, that challenged the way that I thought about things, and really helped me to prepare and be able to tackle those kind of problems in my business career, right? And so there were many of those professors that I can think of that really helped me to understand that there were many different ways to look at problems, and I have this conversation with my kids, all the time, right? Is that, there's always 5 or 10 different views of what the problem is in any given argument that's going on, right? And everybody believes that they are correct. And the person that's going to be able to succeed is the one that can understand those different perspectives and kind of be able to assimilate that. So as important as my hard skill classes were, those other classes I think really have equipped me to succeed.
Absolutely. And it's all about growing as an individual and gaining awareness and knowledge and skills from, as you mentioned, different perspective. So thank you so much for that. So I really like this next question, and thinking about how fast technology is affecting us, do you believe we will have some personal or communal responsibility towards the effect that technology has on us?
Yeah, I do, and I think that first off, we have that communal responsibility regardless of technology. But I think that technology in itself can be such an enabler that we need to make sure that everyone has access to it, that everyone can use that, and that people are not left behind, because it is going to be such a differentiator as you start moving up that curve, right? It will generate value, it will generate jobs, it will allow people to get ahead that much faster, right? And so we have to be very careful about the effects of that on our society. Earlier on in the talk, I talked about this idea of reaching that singularity event where, essentially there's very few jobs anymore, right? Now, there's all sorts of discussion about whether that ever happens or whether that ever occurs. But, we have to be aware of that. We have to be cognizant of it. And we have to be thinking about it. And I tell you, it is all of our responsibility as technologists to make sure that we're designing technology that is accessible and ubiquitous for everyone.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Just as much as we would say that everybody deserves, the right to read, it's the same concept, right?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That was fantastic. So the next question is on the subject of change and upgrade. So as you may have touched on this. So due to the change and upgrades of platforms, the students I'm sure want to know what program languages should they really invest their time on now or start to invest their time on?
Well, again, I could rattle off, a couple of hot languages, out in the field right now. But again, I don't think it is what language because it is perishable. That is a perishable skill, right? It is more about being able to pick up new languages and apply them. So, certainly Python is a great example of a language you might use in developing some AI. But I guarantee you that in 5 years from now, Python is not going to be the hot skill. And so for me as a individual, when I'm looking for new people coming onto the team, it's not necessarily, or it's not all about what language they know, but it's about whether they have the structure to be able to learn and adapt.
Very good. Thank you so much again. So this next question, how has your major in computer science and finance helped you in your journey at AT&T, considering the majors are very different from each other?
Yeah, so that's interesting, right? So I started off wanting to be pre-med, right? And then I hit a year of organic chemistry and decided that was probably not the thing for me, and ended up taking a computer science class. And what I really liked about computer science was the ability to design and build new things and figure out the best way to go about, getting those jobs done. And so that's what really drew me to computer science, right? From a finance perspective, it just became very clear to me early on that in this business world that we're in, that you need to understand how the business works and how finance plays a part in almost every decision that we make. Because at the end of the day, our job is to provide value for our stockholders and the community that we live and work in, right? And there is limited money. And so there's always 50 great ideas, but there's probably only money to do 5 of them, right? And maybe really only to do one really well, right? It's going to kind of change the game, kind of, right? And so we have to be very aware of choosing the things that are going to give the best value back to our shareholders. And so finance and is really an integral part of that, because that's how you evaluate the worth of the projects. And so really they're much more interrelated than probably people think they are. So my MBA was a great benefit booster for me, particularly as I, kind of moved up the management track in order to be able to understand how the business worked on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely. And that's one thing I always tell the students, because they also ask, like, what are some of those key things that we should start applying even on campus? Is when you think about those internships and applying their skills, whether it's in programming, we also highlight, well, it's also having a good business acumen and those leadership skill sets, because all those work together in benefiting in both themselves, as you mentioned, our shareholders. So absolutely. So we do have time for one last question, and this is a very interesting question, and to me, I really like where this will go. But what would you say is the best way for students to gain learning experience from AI, or for, I should say, AI?
So I think it's just dive in, right? I think there's obviously classes that you can, take in school. I think, data analytics is a great way to get, introduction into that. As much as I hate to say it, I think advanced statistics is another one of those strong skill sets that will help you down that path. But there's many classes that you can take in school that will help you get started. The other is, again, like I said, just dive in. There's a lot of stuff that's available from, open source that you can go and use to help you do data ingestion and start to build some of those models. There's some great classes out there on Udacity, for example, that, you can get access to. Many of those are free. There's lots of other learning resources as well. And, there's nothing better, in my opinion, than actually just kind of diving in and using some of those to solve some problems that you're faced with every day. It doesn't have to be, build the next, singularity supercomputer that can play chess or Go better than the next guy. Much of these applications that we're doing in the business, they're not super complicated machine learning AI type things. They use simple algorithms that are available, out in open source, and you can get a hold of those and apply some of those yourself, whether it's random forest or whatever type of algorithms you need. You can do that and apply that, in your daily life.
Very good, very good. Thank you so much, Ward, for your time. Really appreciate the content you shared with us today. We couldn't thank you enough. Really helpful, and I'm sure the students really enjoyed it. So thank you once again.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It was my pleasure.
All right, well, students, AT&T Extern, aka Quarantine, want to thank you for your time. When you do exit this session, there will be a survey that will launch. Please take the moment and just give us your valuable feedback in terms of this experience. We also would like to inform you that in just 1 hour, we will be hearing from our Senior Vice President and Chief Digital Officer, Bella Subramanian, presenting on omnichannel and digital transformation as well. If you have not registered, please take this opportunity to go to work.att.jobs/extra credit. I want to thank you for your time, and we'll see you in an hour.
Thanks.